Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world where kingdoms rise, warriors bleed for banners, and the weight of a crown can crush as easily as a blade. The firelight flickers softly across your closed eyelids, casting shadows of kings and battlefields onto the inside of your mind. The hum of distant voices, chanting, clashing, echoing through vaulted halls and battlefield fog, tickles your ears as you begin to drift. The scent is iron-rich, thick with blood and smoke and spiced incense from forgotten cathedrals. Somewhere, a crown is lowered onto a brow, and you probably won't survive what comes next. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moon rests just above the horizon, cold and silver as steel. You walk beneath it, barefoot on a misty path that stretches between centuries. Your breath rises in little clouds. Somewhere in the dark, you hear a sword being drawn, not in anger, but in memory. It shivers like a violin string in winter air. The question waits for you like a throne. Who was the greatest warrior king of the Middle Ages? Not the richest, not the wisest, not the one with the best hair, though there were some excellent beards in the running. No, you're chasing someone else tonight. The one whose name struck awe into armies. The one whose banner whipped in the storm. The one whose crown was earned not by birth alone, but by blood, grit, and that strange cocktail of charisma and cruelty that defines a true war-born ruler. But don't rush. The road is long. Your first step lands somewhere in the blurred edges of time, where fact, legend, and poetry get all tangled up. Where battles are told in a hush, because history's not always sure which version actually happened. But this dream of yours? It remembers. Dreams always do. Tonight, you're not just hearing history. You're inhabiting it. So let's begin where most great power stories begin, with longing. You feel it as a pressure behind your ribs, deep, heavy, ancient. The longing of men to be remembered. Not just to rule, but to matter. That's what makes a warrior king, after all, not how many castles he built, but how many hearts he captured, how many enemies he humbled, how many ballads echo centuries later when the sword is long rusted and the bones are just dust under cathedral floors. And there were so many who tried. Kings in chainmail. Kings in silks. Kings who quoted scripture before battle. Kings who whispered curses through broken teeth. Some led from horseback, lance raised to the sky. Others paced their war tents alone, eyes glowing with sleepless dreams of empire. And yet, the more you learn, the trickier it gets. Because there isn't just one warrior king. There's a whole gallery of them. Some crowned by history, some forgotten, others still fiercely debated. Historians still argue whether a true warrior king must fight personally on the battlefield, your sleepy brain whispers. Or if it's enough to command from afar, with genius strategy and unshakable will. So, which kind are you dreaming of tonight? Is he tall? Broad-shouldered? Does he carry a sword the size of a small boat? Or maybe he's gaunt, wiry, eyes like twin obsidian knives. Maybe he's quiet, until he's not. You feel the presence of one, just ahead in the fog. He turns. His face is cloaked in shadow, but the outline of his crown glimmers faintly. He's not smiling. But he's not frowning, either. He's just waiting. As if he knows, this dream is about him. Still, you're not ready to name him yet. Instead, you linger on a battlefield strewn with echoes. There's a chill in the air, and it's not just the weather. It's the weight of memory. You kneel and pick up a helmet. It's dented, scorched, featherless. Once, someone wore this into the heart of war, shouting a name they believed would last forever. You put it down. A quirk of medieval legend. Some kings had swords with names, but no one can agree on what their favorite food was. Funny how that works. A blade endures in stories, its weight, its shimmer, even its thirst for blood, but whether the king liked pears or pheasant? Lost to time. You smile. Even in dreams, the absurdity of history pokes through. Behind you, a banner flaps in invisible wind. You turn just in time to see it vanish. But the symbol on it, faint but real, burns into your mind. A lion? A dragon? A crescent moon? You'll see it again, later. A whisper of what's to come. In the distance, drums begin to pulse. Not war drums, yet. More like a heartbeat. Steady. Building. Luring you forward into the centuries. And that heartbeat? It belongs to Richard. Yes, Richard the Lionheart. A king of England who barely spoke English, who spent most of his life abroad, crusading, conquering, craving the holy. And yet, his name has endured, braided into myth, splashed across stained glass, even used in video games, often with suspiciously perfect abs. Was he truly the greatest warrior king? Some experts remain divided. He was brave, no doubt. Ferociously so. But was he wise? Was he kind? Did he care more for glory than governance? But those are questions for the next breath, the next dream. For now, you simply stand in the presence of war-born royalty, not yet knowing whose name history will favor, whose legend will outlast empires. The fog swirls again. Behind you, 100 kings are watching. In front of you, Richard waits. And you, my brave sleeper, you're just getting started. You open your eyes, or do you? It's hard to tell in this dream space, where everything is gold-drenched and slow like honey. The sunlight bleeds through arched windows in a vast stone hall, glinting off a sword resting across a table. Beside it, a crown, heavy, polished, not quite sitting still. And there, lounging like a lion in human form, is Richard the First of England. You've heard of him before. Maybe from school. Maybe from Robin Hood stories. Maybe from that one medieval movie you half-watched with a slice of pizza on your chest. But here, he's more than a name. He's heat. He's fury. He's a storm in a golden cloak. And he's getting restless. Because while kings rule from thrones, Richard dreams of siege towers and blazing banners. Born in Oxford, raised mostly in Aquitaine, Richard barely even saw the England he ruled. He considered it a place to tax, not to love. But when it came to battle, he adored it. Truly. With the kind of poetic devotion most people reserve for soulmates or dessert. You walk beside him now, past his men, through tents pitched on dusty foreign soil. It's 1191. The Third Crusade. And Richard is not here to play nice. The Holy Land stretches out ahead, parched and fierce. But Richard? Richard is in his element. The sun beats down on his armor, and he grins beneath his helm. The kind of grin that says, I know I could die today, but have you seen my sword? Historians still argue whether Richard was a great king, or merely a great warrior wearing a crown. He raised taxes, ignored domestic affairs, and spent more time fighting than governing. But no one disputes this. When Richard led troops, people followed. Even when they were outnumbered. Even when hope was thin. At the Battle of Arsuf, he charged with such brutal clarity that even his enemies marveled. He fought beside his men, not from behind velvet curtains. That sort of thing mattered, back then. Still does, maybe. And you're right there. Your dream self rides just behind him, feeling the thrum of hooves through the earth, the sting of dust in your eyes. You don't know if you're soldier, squire, or ghost. But it doesn't matter. You feel the heat of purpose, the pulse of destiny. And then, you blink. You're in Acre, on the coast. Siege towers creak like tired bones. Arrows hum through the air like bees with grudges. Richard, already ill with fever, is nonetheless commanding the siege with ruthless brilliance. His men adore him, in that slightly terrified way. He commands loyalty like gravity commands the tide. But not everyone's enchanted. Across the lines, Saladin, the great Muslim leader, waits. Their mutual respect becomes legendary. Some even whisper they exchanged gifts. That Richard offered his physician to tend Saladin's illness. Is it true? Some experts remain divided. But your dream doesn't care. It shows you a quiet moment, Richard atop a hill, staring across to the enemy camp, murmuring something in French. You lean in. He's quoting scripture. Or poetry. Maybe both. Here's a fringe fact for your sleepy mind. Richard once supposedly used a trebuchet named Bad Neighbor. Because even his siege weapons came with sarcasm. You smile, half asleep, imagining this lion-hearted king slapping names on his catapults like they're medieval mixtapes. But not all is glory. As the crusade drags on, so does Richard's frustration. Jerusalem remains out of reach. His men are tired. Politics back home are unraveling. He negotiates peace, reluctantly, and begins the long journey home. That's when things get weird. Captured. Yes, captured, like a plot twist in an epic novel. On his way back, Richard is detained by Duke Leopold of Austria, whom he'd kind of humiliated earlier. Awkward. He's handed over to the Holy Roman Emperor. And England? England panics. The ransom? Massive. The largest in medieval history. 150,000 marks. That's, like, 1 billion turkey legs in medieval currency. The people pay. The crown is saved. But something inside Richard shifts. When he finally returns, his rule is brief, warlike, and restless. He campaigns in France, like a man chasing a shadow he'll never quite catch. And in 1199, during a petty siege over a minor castle, he's shot by a crossbow bolt. Infection sets in. He dies. Just like that. The Lionheart is silenced. But his legend? Oh, it's just beginning. Your dream flickers again. You see his tomb, carved marble, lions at his feet. But here's the strange bit, his heart was buried separately. In Rouen. His brain and entrails. Different places. As if even in death, Richard refused to be kept in one place. Quirky, huh? The medieval version of leaving your playlist on 5 devices. And yet, the myth grows. France admired him. England mourned him. Enemies respected him. Ballads sang of him. His bravery was so intoxicating, it outshone his actual record as a king. Was he the greatest warrior king? Maybe. Maybe not. But he was certainly one of the most theatrical. You, my brave sleeper, feel the echo of his battle cry as it fades into the wind. A voice not of peace, but of purpose. And somewhere, far across the sands of time, another voice begins to rise. Not in French. Not in English. But in Arabic. A call to prayer. A call to arms. A call to Saladin. You're still warm from the heat of Richard's last campaign, but now the dream turns, cooler. Quieter. The crackling fire of the Lionheart fades into the golden hush of desert twilight. You feel the shift in the air, the rhythm of footsteps softened by sand, the rustle of linen robes, the scent of jasmine carried on the wind. And somewhere in that silence, you meet a man whose power lies not in roaring, but in stillness. Al-ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. But you may know him simply as Saladin. He does not enter with a shout or fanfare. He arrives like the evening call to prayer, steadfast, serene, deeply grounded. Where Richard Lionheart blazed like a comet across the sky, Saladin walks with the patient certainty of the moon. You watch from a shadowed archway as he moves through his court in Cairo, calm but commanding. The silk of his robe barely whispers, but men bow low as he passes. Not out of fear, no, never quite that. It's respect. Earned, not demanded. The kind of reverence that doesn't come with a crown, but with character. Born in Tikrit in 1137 or 1138, scholars still argue the exact date. Saladin wasn't bred for kingship. In fact, early accounts suggest he was quiet, studious, more interested in theology than swords. Hardly the image of a warrior king. But fate is a patient sculptor. And Saladin's destiny sharpened, bit by bit, in the crucible of war. You blink, and now you're in Damascus. The sun glares off marble minarets. Saladin rises through the military ranks under his uncle Shirkuh, eventually inheriting command. Egypt is the chessboard now, and Saladin plays masterfully, first as vizier, then as sultan, toppling the once mighty Fatimid dynasty with a strange, almost reluctant grace. He does not seize power with bloodlust. He simply takes it. Like a tide. Quiet, unstoppable, devout. And then, of course, there's Jerusalem. You hear the whisper ripple through your dream like the flap of ravens' wings. Jerusalem. A city drenched in prayers and pain. Crusaders had claimed it in 1099 in one of the bloodiest sieges the world had ever seen. Saladin watched, waited, and planned. In 1187, after the stunning victory at the Battle of Hattin, where he lured Crusader forces into the scorching wilderness and decimated them, Saladin marched to the city's gates. Unlike the First Crusade's brutal conquest, his reclamation was merciful. Civilians were allowed to leave. Ransoms were fair. No rivers of blood, no desecrated altars. Some Western chroniclers, to their own surprise, praised his humanity. Some experts remain divided on whether that mercy was strategic or sincere. Maybe both. But to your dreaming ears, it echoes with dignity. And oh, Richard knew of him. Feared him. Respected him. Though they never met face to face, their correspondence shimmered with tension and reluctant admiration. In one letter, Richard even proposed marrying his sister to Saladin's brother, as if matrimony could solve the Crusades. Spoiler, it didn't. Here's a quirky tidbit to smile about. Saladin once refused to kill a captured enemy knight because he said it was unbecoming of a sultan. Then, according to one tale, he sent the man home with money for the journey. A little Bedouin Uber situation, 12th century style. You find yourself smiling again, watching him walk among the people. He doesn't wear extravagant armor. No jewel-drenched crown. Just a plain turban and the gravity of someone who doesn't need to prove he's in charge. When he dies in 1193, he has, quite literally, no money left. He gave it all away. No silk-wrapped inheritance. No hoarded legacy. Just stories. And scholars. And generations of Muslims and Christians alike who, bafflingly, honor him. Was he the greatest warrior king? Well, he was a king. He was a warrior. But the real debate is, does kindness dilute greatness, or deepen it? Historians still ask if his mercy made him stronger, or left him open to manipulation. You glance back across the dreamscape and see Richard again, storming through a battle, armor clanging like a thunder god. Then you turn, and there's Saladin, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the same scene with thoughtful eyes. They are fire and water. Sword and prayer. Roar and whisper. And both, somehow, unforgettable. You, my gentle dreamer, are not just watching kings tonight. You're watching mirrors. Men reflecting the contradictions of their age. Piety and violence. Strategy and myth. And you're learning, slowly, that greatness doesn't wear just one face. The sands begin to shift. A wind curls around your ankles, tugging you forward. You look over your shoulder one last time. Saladin nods, solemn, regal, already fading into history's haze. The wind grows stronger. You catch fragments of Latin, German, armor creaking like old doors. Something's coming. Heavier. Hungrier. A king not remembered for mercy, but for metal. And water. And the slow, sinking silence of legend. The wind shifts, and you're somewhere colder now. Mist clings to your skin. It smells of rain-soaked iron and wet parchment. The golden hues of the Levant fade behind you, and ahead, rising like a citadel from a dream, is the Holy Roman Empire. Yes, the next king doesn't simply rule a kingdom. He claims to rule Christendom. Frederick I Barbarossa, they called him. Red beard. Red temper. Red destiny, depending on how poetic you're feeling. A king of Germany. A Roman emperor. A crusader. And, oddly enough, a legend who drowned in a stream. But we're not there yet. You see him now, taller than the others in your dreamscape. Not in height, necessarily, but in presence. Thick beard like fire tangled with frost. Armor that clinks with the weight of ambition. And eyes that don't just look at lands, they measure them. It's the 12th century. And Barbarossa's empire is a web of principalities, dukedoms, and troublesome Italian cities. He spends most of his reign crisscrossing the Alps like a determined postal service, campaigning, bargaining, sometimes burning things down. Scholars still debate whether he was more king or mythmaker. But one thing is certain, when he moved, everyone noticed. You ride beside him now. The world smells of pine and smoldering coal. His court is less theatrical than Richard's, less devout than Saladin's, but it hums with the machinery of statecraft. Latin scrolls pass between fingers like whispered promises. Gold coins thud on wooden tables. And behind it all, a holy purpose begins to throb like a drumbeat in the distance. The Third Crusade. You remember it, vaguely, from your time with Richard. But this? This is the German force. And Frederick? He's not just joining the crusade. He's leading it. He sets out in 1189 with perhaps 100,000 men, though some experts remain divided on whether that number was inflated by chroniclers with a flair for the dramatic. Either way, it was a lot. Enough to make the Byzantine emperor nervous. Enough to rattle the bones of Saladin himself. The road is long. Dangerous. Political. Through Hungary, across Byzantine lands, into Anatolia. And the whole time, you feel it, this old lion of a man pulling his armor tighter, shaking off the years, reaching for something eternal. But here's your quirky historical snack. Barbarossa was over 60 when he marched on the crusade. 60. Most people his age were settling into monasteries or plotting which of their sons would disappoint them the least. Not this guy. He had mountains to cross. Battles to win. And, well, a river to drown in. Yes. Here's where the dream dips suddenly into still water. The year is 1190. It's summer. The heat bites, and the men are weary. They reach the Salef River in Cilicia, modern-day Turkey. Some say Frederick stripped off his armor to cool off. Others claim he attempted to ride across on horseback. Either way, the emperor vanishes beneath the current. And doesn't come back up. It's one of those bizarre historical moments you almost can't believe. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, drowned not in battle, not by arrow or sword, but by water. A footnote turned tragedy. Or maybe a tragedy turned legend. Some say his men tried to preserve his body in vinegar. Some claim his flesh was buried in one city, his bones in another, his heart somewhere else. A dismembered monarch, scattered like confetti across empires. But here's the strange part, he never quite left. In German folklore, Barbarossa sleeps beneath the Kyffhauser Mountains, waiting for the day when Germany needs him again. His beard, they say, has grown through the table at which he rests. And when the ravens cease to fly overhead, he will rise. Which is kind of metal, right? You watch him now, seated at that stone table, deep within the mountain. His eyes are closed. The beard is longer than time. But one hand twitches. Just slightly. As if he senses your gaze. As if he remembers the dream you're dreaming. Historians still argue over what his death meant. Would the Third Crusade have succeeded with him alive? Would Saladin have held Jerusalem? Would Richard have followed? No one knows. But in your dream, the ripples in the river haven't stopped. They widen, distort, and within them, a reflection forms, not of Frederick, but of another warrior king. This one has no beard, no crown, just scars, and a name whispered through Icelandic sagas, Irish annals, and the smoky halls of Valhalla. You feel the cold now. The true cold. Iron and ice. Sea spray and blood. The Vikings are coming. And at their helm, a warrior king who carves poetry into blades and kingdoms into stone. Brace yourself, dreamer. Harald Hardrada awaits. The wind roars now, louder than before. It shrieks through the rigging of longships and dances on the black waves. The dream has gone colder, harsher. Your breath becomes visible, as if the air itself bears witness to what's coming. And there he is. A mountain of a man, cloaked in wolf fur and history, silhouetted against a churning northern sky. His eyes, sharp as Sikh's blades, scan the horizon not for peace, but for glory. You don't just meet Harald Hardrada, you feel him. Like thunder rolling in your bones. You're in Norway, sometime around 1015. Maybe. Historians still argue over his precise birth year. What they don't argue about is this: Harald was born into the fire of Viking warfare. Half-brother to King Olaf II, he fought in the legendary Battle of Stiklestad at the age of 15. A boy with a sword, standing shoulder to shoulder with the gods of his age. Spoiler, he lost that battle. But he didn't die. Instead, your dream shifts, and you're following him into exile. Eastward, into the glittering courts of the Kievan Rus. Then further still, into the opulence of Byzantium. Yes, this Viking warrior ends up serving in the elite Varangian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard. A Norseman in silk halls, guarding Greek emperors and fighting wars from Sicily to Jerusalem. Imagine it, Harald, once a teenage rebel, now wearing lamellar armor in Constantinople, commanding troops, collecting loot, writing poetry. Yes, poetry. He composed verse about his own battles. Humble? No. Entertaining? Absolutely. One stanza survives, translated roughly. We cleared the land with flame. I carved my name on shattered shields. Modest, right? He earns so much wealth while serving in Byzantium, he sends it home to Norway in giant treasure chests. It said he even tried to marry a Byzantine princess. Some experts remain divided on whether that was ambition, or just Harald being Harald. Eventually, he returns to Norway, battle-tested, fabulously rich, and absolutely not in the mood to ask politely for a throne. In 1046, he forces his way into a co-kingship with Magnus the Good. A year later, oops, Magnus dies, and Harald reigns alone. Coincidence? Probably. Murder? No evidence. Suspicious side-eye from historians? Very. Now he's King Harald III of Norway. But Hardrada, his nickname, means hard ruler. You feel why, don't you? There's a tension in the dream now. His rule is not warm. Not soft. It's steel and law, carved deep into the fjords. He reforms the military. centralizes royal power, builds churches, and burns villages when necessary. He's not cruel for fun, but he's absolutely fine with collateral damage. One joke from a medieval saga claims he taxed a peasant's sneeze. Highly unlikely, but you kind of believe it. And yet, for all his strength, Harold still wants more. You feel the itch in his blood, England. That old Viking dream. In 1066, when Edward the Confessor dies, Harold stakes his claim. Never mind that Edward never promised him the throne, Harold has distant relations, and a convenient agreement with a now-dead Danish king. That's enough. So he sails. Over 300 longships cut through the sea like shark fins. His army lands in the north of England and wins the Battle of Fulford. Easy. Clean. Triumph. But then, you hear hoofbeats. Fast. Desperate. Harold Godwin's son, the new English king, has force-marched his army from the south. At Stamford Bridge, the two Harolds clash. And Harald Hardrada, legendary warrior, Emperor's Guard, King of Norway, charges into battle in gleaming mail. No helmet. Just that giant axe and a grin carved into war. They say he was hit by an arrow through the throat. Some say he sang as he died. And here's your quirky twist. The Vikings who survived were allowed to leave, but needed only 24 ships. Out of more than 300. The age of the Viking warrior kings ends in a single autumn day. You stand beside him now, the battlefield quiet around you. Ravens circle above. Harold's breath clouds the air one final time before fading. His axe is half buried in English mud. A god, brought low by mortality. Still, what a life. From boy soldier to Byzantine commander to king to would-be conqueror of England, his saga sprawls across half the known world. Few warrior kings were as global as Hardrada. Historians still argue if he was the last great Viking, or just the final gasp of an age that had already ended. But as your dream darkens to twilight, you know this. He believed he could take the world. And for a moment, the world almost let him. The sky rumbles. A bell tolls in the distance, not Christian, not Norse, but Mongol. Deep and thunderous. A new warrior king approaches. A horseman who does not ride around empires. He rides through them. You don't hear him at first. You feel him. A tremble beneath the earth. A wind that smells like horse sweat and lightning. And then, just over the curve of the world, you glimpse him, not a man, not yet, but a movement. A prophecy wrapped in hide and steel. The dream shakes, the sky splits, and he arrives. Genghis Khan. No crown. No castle. Just endless sky above him, and everything beneath him soon to burn. He is born Temujin, around 1162, near the Onan River in what is now Mongolia. But already, the scholars are arguing. Some say his birth was foretold by a blood clot clutched in his tiny fist. Others whisper that wolves circled the camp that night, as if sensing something unnatural had entered the world. But you, dreamer, you see just a boy. Cold. Hungry. Watching his father be poisoned by rival tribes, then exiled with his family into starvation. No prince. No army. Just pain and the slow, steady growth of iron inside his bones. That's where his legend begins. Not in battle, but in abandonment. His early life? Pure Game of Thrones energy. Betrayals. Kidnappings. Feuds with blood brothers. Historians still debate if his survival was strategy, or sheer cosmic spite. Either way, you follow him through the years as he unites Mongol tribes with a mix of charm, terror, and battlefield brilliance. And suddenly, he's not Temujin anymore. In 1206, he's declared Genghis Khan, universal ruler. And that's when history holds its breath. You stand now on the vast Mongolian steppe, wind flattening the grass like it's bowing. All around you, warriors on horseback. Not knights in gleaming armor, but lightning made flesh. Light, fast, deadly. Their composite bows curve like smiles that know what's coming. You can hear the rhythm of hoofbeats like war drums. Genghis's army doesn't march, it gallops. And it does not meet enemies. It consumes them. China. Khwarezm. Persia. Russia. And later, under his descendants, Baghdad. Korea. Parts of Europe. A quirky little fact that sounds like a joke but isn't. Genghis created the world's first international postal system, the yam. Riders every few miles. Horses fresh and ready. News moved faster than armies. Faster than fear. Imagine Amazon Prime, but sponsored by the apocalypse. And get this, he loved spreadsheets. Okay, not literally. But he demanded censuses, tax codes, even religious freedom. Mongol administration wasn't chaos, it was cold, calculated bureaucracy. The guy who burned cities to ash also protected trade caravans. The paradox is part of the power. Some experts remain divided on whether he was a liberator or a destroyer. To the Mongols, he was a father of laws, the bringer of unity. To the Persians, Chinese, and Russians, he was a storm wearing human skin. And the numbers? Terrifying. Under his rule, the Mongol Empire grew to cover more than 12 million square miles, the largest contiguous land empire in history. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but a grudge and a really good horse. You're standing beside him now, on a hill somewhere in Central Asia. He watches a conquered city burn below, his eyes unreadable. Not gleeful. Not even angry. Just inevitable. He's not here for vengeance anymore. He's here for order. His kind of order. And yet, you wonder. Did he ever dream of peace? One legend says Genghis was buried in secret. His funeral procession supposedly killed anyone they passed to keep the grave hidden. Then they rode horses over it until all trace was erased. Historians still search for it. Still dream of finding it. Maybe that's why you feel the silence behind his eyes. Because even now, Genghis isn't done. In fact, in your dream, he turns to you. And speaks. You, child of sleep. Would you build an empire? The question echoes. And then the vision flickers. Hoofbeats fade. But a new sound rises. Chains. Chains rattling down stone steps. A hammer striking steel in rhythm. Because the next warrior king doesn't ride on horseback. He marches. And he builds his empire not on plains, but in fire. Charlemagne is coming. Stone presses beneath your feet now. Heavy. Ancient. Worn by the boots of saints and soldiers. You've stepped out of the galloping dream and into something weightier, something carved not in motion, but in memory. You hear the clang of metal on metal, hammer to blade, blade to crown. This is Charlemagne's world now. The year is 768. The Carolingian Empire still shimmers like wet clay, raw and unfinished. But in your dream, the forges are glowing, and one man stands at the center, Charles, King of the Franks. He is not yet the Great. Not yet Pater Europae. Not yet crowned as the Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope himself. But he's about to be. You stand in the shadow of a man who will shape a continent. He's tall, at least, according to the chroniclers who may have stretched the truth, or his measurements. Some say he stood over 6 feet, with bright eyes, a firm voice, and an appetite that rivaled his empire. He loved roasted meats, theological debates, and swimming. Yes, swimming. Charlemagne had a fondness for baths, which, by medieval standards, basically made him a spa influencer. Quirky detail? He reportedly couldn't write. Seriously. Charlemagne pushed literacy across his empire, built schools, and preserved classical texts, but had trouble holding a pen. Some experts remain divided. Maybe he could write a little. Maybe he faked it. But he definitely loved books. Now, turn your gaze to the battlefield. Because this king isn't just a patron of monks and manuscripts, he's a warrior with a divine agenda. Over the next 4 decades, he launches more than 50 campaigns. Saxons, Lombards, Avars, he fights them all. Not just for conquest. Not just for gold. For God. You ride beside him through the thick Saxon forests, where pagan resistance flickers like ghost fire. The Saxon wars rage for years. There are conversions, some voluntary, some, well, less so. The massacre of Verdun, where Charlemagne allegedly executed 4,500 Saxons in one day, still casts a long shadow. Historians still argue whether it was a moral failure or brutal necessity, or both. The dream hums with tension. Because Charlemagne is no gentle father figure. He's an empire smith. A man who bends kings and carves new maps while quoting Augustine and grinning at court jesters. You reach 800 AD now. Christmas Day. St. Peter's Basilica. Rome. The air smells of incense and cold marble. You slip between columns, watching as Pope Leo III places a crown on Charlemagne's head, declaring him Emperor of the Romans. A title long dead, now resurrected. And just like that, the Holy Roman Empire is born. Though, as the joke goes, it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire, at least not yet. But in your dream, it feels holy. Charlemagne breathes in. You feel the weight of his new role settle onto his shoulders like a mantle of iron and smoke. The symbolism isn't lost on him, or you. He's not just a king anymore. He's a bridge between ancient Rome and medieval Europe. And he builds. Oh, does he build? Schools, monasteries, palaces, libraries. The Carolingian Renaissance is no joke. It preserves knowledge that would have otherwise vanished. Latin grammar manuals. Medical texts. Even copies of Virgil. Charlemagne saw education not as luxury, but as infrastructure, like aqueducts for the soul. One delightful fact, he introduced spaces between words in writing. No, really. Before Charlemagne, most texts looked like giant blockofletters. You can thank his scribes for the fact that you're not squinting right now. But here's what sets him apart, dear dreamer. Charlemagne didn't just conquer. He connected. He created a shared Christian identity that would echo across centuries. France, Germany, the papacy, the idea of Europe itself. And yet, he dies in 814 at Aachen, after 46 years of rule. He's buried in a cathedral he built, wrapped in robes, seated on a marble throne with a golden sword at his side. And according to legend, his body sat upright in that tomb for hundreds of years, bearded, crowned, unrotted. Just waiting. Just watching. Historians still debate the truth of that tale, but you, in this soft-breathing dream, see his throne remain. Empty now. But warm. You look down. Your own reflection is in the polished stone. Because once again, the dream is changing. No longer west, but east. To a dusty city, ancient and fierce, with golden domes and muezzins calling across the rooftops. A warrior king waits there, too. But he doesn't seek to conquer Europe. He wants to outshine the world. You've heard of him. You've heard of Mansa Musa. The desert greets you not with silence, but with shimmer. Sunlight glints across endless waves of sand, and each grain seems to whisper legends. The heat here isn't oppressive, it's majestic, like velvet fire draped over the world. And there, in the heart of West Africa, rises a kingdom carved in gold. Welcome to Mali. You are standing at the edge of Timbuktu, and before you even see the king, you feel the weight of his name pressing on your chest like a heavy coin, Mansa Musa. Mansa. Not just king, but ruler of rulers. The year? Somewhere around 1312. Musa has just taken the throne after his predecessor supposedly vanished during an ambitious Atlantic expedition. Historians still argue whether this voyage was a myth, a maritime disaster, or an early trip to the Americas. Either way, awkward succession plan. But you, dreamer, have arrived just in time to watch the world change. Because Musa doesn't just rule Mali. He redefines it. Gold? He has so much, his name becomes synonymous with wealth. Literally. When people today try to rank the richest human beings in history, Mansa Musa almost always tops the list, sometimes beating emperors, tsars, tech CEOs, and oil magnates. One tale says he couldn't count his gold. Only weigh it. But gold alone doesn't make a legend. It's what he does with it. In 1324, Mansa Musa sets out on the Hajj, a pilgrimage to Mecca that becomes the most extravagant road trip in human history. And you, lucky dreamer, are riding alongside him. You squint into the glare of the Sahara and see it, a caravan stretching as far as the horizon. Over 60,000 people. Servants. Scholars. Soldiers. Musicians. Horses and camels loaded with shimmering cloth and bars of gold. Quirky detail. Even the camels wore embroidered saddles. And then there's the gold. Musa gives it away like candy. In Cairo, he hands out so much wealth that the local economy crashes. Gold's value plunges for over a decade. No exaggeration, decade. Economists centuries later still cite him in studies of inflation. He bought respect with generosity. But what he built was lasting. As the pilgrimage ends and the desert exhales, Musa returns, not with dust, but with ideas. He brings back architects from Cairo and Andalusia, scholars, imams, books. With them, he reimagines Timbuktu into a center of Islamic learning, trade, and art. You walk now through the Sankore University, where manuscripts line the walls like spellbooks. Astronomy, law, mathematics, philosophy. Not copied, but debated. The scholars wear robes of indigo and speak in 5 different languages. And outside, markets hum. Traders from as far as Europe and the Middle East barter spices and salt for nuggets of gold the size of fists. Here's a sweet little contradiction. Despite his fame, no known image of Mansa Musa was drawn during his lifetime. Most depictions come from European maps. Some show him grinning awkwardly, holding a gold orb like a medieval Mr. Monopoly. The truth? He was much more refined. Your dream shows you the real version. He sits on a carved wooden throne, calloused hands resting on scrolls, not just swords. He speaks softly, thinks deeply. His empire stretches from the Atlantic coast through the Sahel, with roads guarded, cities fortified, and trade routes glowing with prosperity. Some experts remain divided on whether Musa was more pious pilgrim or political genius. Maybe both. He used Islam not just as a faith, but as a connective tissue, linking Mali to the broader Islamic world and securing diplomatic respect from Cairo to Constantinople. And yet, Musa did not seek conquest like Genghis. He didn't storm castles like Charlemagne. He wielded influence with elegance, with intellect, with opulence so dazzling, it made kings jealous and merchants dizzy. As you drift through the dream, a call to prayer lifts in the distance. Sand swirls around your feet. And the empire, his empire, feels endless. But no reign is truly eternal. Musa dies in 1337. Likely in his mid-50s. His sons succeed him, but the golden age doesn't quite hold. Rivals stir. The salt mines become battlegrounds. Eventually, the empire frays like the edge of an old map. Still, Musa's legacy glows beneath the dust. Scholars still study his economic impact. Historians still puzzle over how so much wealth, so much wisdom, could rise and recede like a desert mirage. But you, gentle dreamer, you felt it. You walked his gold-lit streets. You heard the ancient scholars debating beneath the Saharan moon. You witnessed a king who ruled with both reverence and radiance. And as the dunes dissolve around you, something stirs beneath your feet. Something colder. Tougher. The dream reshapes once more. Now, it's forged in chainmail and granite. Shields clash. Lances glint. And above it all, the English lion roars. You're about to meet Richard the Lionheart. Armor groans as you move. It's heavier now, chainmail hugging your body, a sword strapped to your side, the scent of steel and sweat thick in your nostrils. You're not riding through golden sands anymore. You're marching through history's most romanticized battlefield. The Age of Knights. The Age of Crusades. And in the center of it, Richard I of England. Or as the world knows him, Richard the Lionheart. Born in 1157, a prince of the House of Plantagenet, Richard is royalty before he can even hold a dagger. His mother? None other than Eleanor of Aquitaine, possibly the most powerful woman of the 12th century. His father? King Henry II, a man who builds an empire spanning from Scotland to the Pyrenees, but can't seem to keep his sons from rebelling. And rebel they do. Richard spends his youth not polishing his manners, but sharpening his ambition. At 16, he leads an armed revolt against his father. You'd think that might get him grounded, or executed, but this is medieval politics. Family betrayal is practically a holiday tradition. He earns the nickname OCE No, Yes and No, in Occitan, because of his hot temper and habit of saying whatever the opposite of what you want to hear. But he isn't just sass and swords. He's a natural commander. Charismatic. Fierce. And once crowned king in 1189, Richard barely warms the throne before setting off on the Third Crusade. That's right. The King of England spends less than 6 months of his 10-year reign actually in England. The rest? Battles. Castles. Campaigns. And one very famous enemy. Saladin. Now, your dream sharpens. You're in the Holy Land. The sky is bleached white. The city of Acre looms ahead, a stronghold laced with death and desperation. Richard arrives to find the Crusader siege floundering. So he takes over. He reorganizes the army. Builds siege engines. Cuts supply lines. Within weeks, the city surrenders. But what happens next? A whisper of controversy. Richard executes 2,700 Muslim prisoners when negotiations stall. A decision still debated. Was it cold necessity? Brutal theatrics? Some historians argue he wanted to send Saladin a message. Others think he simply lost patience. Because that's Richard, impulsive and brilliant in the same breath. But even Saladin respects him. The two never meet in person, but their battles become legendary. The most iconic? The Battle of Arsuf in 1191. Richard leads a weary army across sweltering terrain, harassed by Saladin's forces every step. Most leaders would break. Not Richard. He waits. Times his counterattack like a coiled spring, and unleashes it at just the right moment. The result? A rare Crusader victory. Even Saladin's chroniclers admit, the Lionheart was impressive. A quirky detail for you, Richard was a poet. Yes, under all that chainmail and bravado, he wrote lyrical verses in Occitan, songs of love, longing, and exile. One ballad, composed while imprisoned, speaks of betrayal and fading fame. Not exactly what you'd expect from a guy known for swinging a broadsword through Saracen cavalry. And speaking of prison, Richard doesn't ride home triumphant. He gets captured in Austria on the return journey. Imagine that, King of England, prisoner of a German duke, locked in a remote castle while his enemies back home squabble over the crown. Legend says his location was discovered by a loyal minstrel named Blondel, who wandered castle to castle singing Richard's songs until one was answered from a window. Historians still argue if Blondel ever existed. But in the dream, you hear the song echo down the halls. He's eventually ransomed, for a staggering 150,000 marks, nearly 3 years' worth of England's income. Ouch. He returns home. Briefly. Rebuilds his armies. And then, off to war again. This time in France, defending Aquitaine, fighting rival claimants and old grudges. Until, one night in 1199, at the siege of a minor castle in Calais, Richard gets careless. He takes a crossbow bolt to the shoulder. The wound festers. Infection sets in. And the lion heart fades. At just 41 years old. A warrior who reigned more on the battlefield than in any court. A king who never fathered a legitimate heir. A legend woven with contradictions. Some call him a reckless adventurer. Others, a model of knightly virtue. Some experts remain divided on whether Richard was a great king, or just a great soldier who wore a crown. But in the dream, as you stand beside his tomb in Fontevraud Abbey, the stone lions at his feet seem almost alive. As if they're still growling. Still guarding something ancient. You reach out, and the air cools. Far to the east, behind the mountains of Japan, a new warrior king awakens. But he doesn't rule with swords or sieges. He rules with silence. With code. And with shadows. You're about to walk the path of Tokugawa Ieyasu. A hush falls over the dream. Gone are the roaring crowds of crusade and conquest. Gone is the jingle of gold and the echo of ancient scholars. Now, the world feels suspended. Like a breath held for generations. You stand beneath the cherry blossoms of old Japan, their petals drifting through twilight like slow-falling snow. There are no armies marching here. No crusades. No golden caravans. Just silence. Stillness. Precision. But do not be fooled, gentle dreamer. You are in the presence of a warrior king who never needed to roar. His name is Tokugawa Ieyasu. And he builds an empire that lasts longer than most kings ever live. He is not born into absolute power. He earns it, one scar at a time. Born in 1543, into a Japan splintered by civil war, the Sengoku Jidai, or Warring States, period, Ieyasu is traded as a hostage before he even understands what war means. But he watches. He learns. And unlike many of his rivals, Ieyasu survives. That's no small feat. Feudal Japan was a chessboard made of blood and betrayal. Daimyos rose and fell like summer storms. Castles burned overnight. Family members turned traitor with alarming punctuality. Yet through all this, Ieyasu plays the long game. The very long game. He allies with Oda Nobunaga, the warlord who begins Japan's unification. When Nobunaga is assassinated, Ieyasu wisely supports the next rising star, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a peasant-turned-general who finishes what Nobunaga started. But when Hideyoshi dies in 1598, he leaves behind a toddler heir and a dangerously unstable regency. Ieyasu. Now in his late 50s, an old man by samurai standards, he waits. While others scramble for control, he builds alliances. Sharpens loyalties. And finally, in 1600, the dream darkens with thunderclouds above a wide, open plain. Sekigahara. It is Japan's Gettysburg. A colossal battle that decides the fate of a nation. You stand there, dreamer, as 160,000 warriors clash in mud and fire. Ieyasu's men hold strong. More importantly, he gambles on betrayal. Several rival generals, bribed and persuaded, defect mid-battle. The tide turns. And with it, history. Tokugawa wins. He is named shogun, military ruler of Japan, by the emperor in 1603. But here's the twist: instead of basking in blood-soaked glory, Ieyasu disappears into governance. He moves the capital to Edo, now Tokyo, builds an intricate system of laws, alliances, and controls designed to prevent war itself. You, brave sleeper, now wander through the halls of his bureaucracy. Every daimyo is ordered to live in Edo every other year, a system called Sankinkotai, keeping their families as guests, read, hostages, while draining their treasuries with travel expenses. Feudal Instagram, if you will. Show up, show off, stay broke. This, paired with strict class systems and foreign isolation, becomes the Tokugawa shogunate, which rules Japan in relative peace for over 250 years. A quirky fact? Ieyasu had his own seal of approval for medicine. He was obsessed with his health, preferring Chinese herbal treatments and even writing diet instructions into military orders. Imagine your general reminding you to eat more pickled radish. But don't mistake his peace for passivity. He knew when to wield the sword. He crushed rebellions with terrifying efficiency. He oversaw the persecution of Christians. He banned firearms to reduce peasant uprisings, or, as some argue, to maintain samurai supremacy. Some experts remain divided on whether Ieyasu's isolationist policies preserved Japanese culture, or stifled its growth. Perhaps both. But one thing is clear: no medieval warrior king held peace in such a chokehold. You walk through Edo's quiet streets now, lanterns flickering softly. The city hums with quiet discipline. And in a distant temple, incense coils skyward over the tomb of a man who dreamed bigger than any battlefield. He dies in 1616 at age 73. He requests to be deified as a guardian spirit. The great Toshogu shrine in Nikko is built in his honor, its gates gilded, its carvings intricate. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, those famous monkeys? You'll find them there, watching over his legend. And his legacy? Well, you already know it. You've seen modern Tokyo. You've seen anime and katana and robotic toilets and global cultural cool. The roots run back here, to a man who won a nation with patience. He was no lion. No horse lord. No gold-slick emperor. He was a ghost king. A strategist in shadows. And now, dreamer, the silence ends. The wind shifts west once more. And what rides toward us next? Is thunder on hooves. You're about to meet the thunder god of Delhi, Alauddin Khalji. You wake to the taste of dust. Hot wind rakes your face, carrying the scent of iron and incense. Sand-colored stone glows gold in the morning sun. Behind you, the grand arches of Delhi's Ala-i Darwaza rise, ancient, perfect, and echoing with stories. This is not the silk-soft peace of Edo. This is the battlefield of Alauddin Khalji, the warrior king who ruled Delhi like a storm held together by sheer will and cold strategy. Born in 1296, he claws his way to power in one of the most turbulent chapters of the Indian subcontinent. You're not stepping into an empire of lullabies here. This is the Delhi Sultanate, and it's as full of betrayal, blood, and brilliance as a Shakespearean epic penned in Sanskrit. Alauddin isn't born royal. He's the nephew of Jalaluddin, the sitting sultan. And, brace yourself, he kills him. Yes. Murder at the dinner table. Historians still argue whether it was a brutal coup or the only way to survive in a political landscape where loyalty lasted about as long as a monsoon puddle. Either way, Alauddin takes the throne, and oh, dreamer, he holds it like a clenched fist. He rules with military brilliance, iron-fisted reforms, and an eye on something few dared dream of, a united Hindustan under Muslim rule. Your steps echo through Delhi's bustling markets, controlled, policed, and price-fixed. That's no accident. Alauddin implements one of the earliest known systems of market regulation in South Asian history. Grain, cloth, horses, even prostitutes and singers, are taxed, catalogued, and set at state-approved prices. Why? To control inflation and feed a massive standing army. Every rupee goes to armor. Every kernel of rice feeds conquest. And he needs conquest. Because beyond Delhi's walls, chaos reigns. Rebellions flare like wildfire. Mongols charge down from the north, waves of horsemen that even Europe fears. But not Alauddin. Oh no. He doesn't just beat them. He breaks them. Drives them back with fury. By some accounts, he defeats the Mongols 6 times. A feat few rulers could even fantasize about. A fringe theory? Some scholars claim he used early forms of espionage, spies disguised as ascetics and merchants reporting back on troop morale, rebellion, and black market whispers. A medieval version of Big Brother with a turban and a scroll. And here's your quirky tidbit: Alauddin hated poets. Tragic, right? Despite ruling a city teeming with Persian and Indian literary masters, he refused to patronize court poets the way most sultans did. He believed history should be written with deeds, not with verses. Though he didn't pen poetry, he sure built monuments. The Alai Minar, his attempt to outdo the Qutb Minar, still stands unfinished, a skeletal giant of ambition and halted dreams. But not everything he builds is stone. He builds fear. This is where the dream darkens, just a bit. Alauddin ruled through terror as much as talent. He abolished private property for nobles. Seized lands. Banned drinking. Punished corruption with execution. He once ordered that all newly appointed officers must hand over their wealth as proof of loyalty, or face the sword. Yikes. Some experts remain divided on whether he was a tyrant or a revolutionary. Was he centralizing power to crush the nobility's exploitation, or to hoard it for himself? In this dream, you see both. You feel the awe of citizens protected from famine and Mongol raiders. And you see the fear in the eyes of generals who grow too ambitious. Alauddin even claims prophetic insight. Rumors swirl that he believes himself above the law. He refuses to follow Sharia, saying kings are a law unto themselves. A bold claim. A dangerous one. Still, it works, for a time. He expands the empire deeper into the Deccan Plateau, raiding kingdoms, plundering temples, and rewriting what northern India's map could be. His general Malik Kafur, a former slave, leads daring expeditions to the deep south, returning with treasure carts so heavy they reportedly made the roads groan. And yet, the years wear him down. Toward the end of his life, Aladdin grows paranoid. Sick. Suspicious of even his most loyal allies. He dies in 1316, likely poisoned or crushed by illness. Malik Kafur seizes control briefly, but the empire wobbles without its iron anchor. And just like that, the dream trembles. The heat shifts. Because while Aladdin built an empire with swords and surveillance, another king, far to the north, will build one with horses, archery, and one of the fiercest warrior traditions on earth. You hear it now. A whisper of wind on the steppes. The gallop of fate. Because the Khans are coming. The dream shakes. Not trembles. Shakes. Because now, you're not strolling palace halls or watching market reforms. You're riding. Fast. Across an endless ocean of grass. There is no throne. No cathedral. No painted silk canopy overhead. Just sky. So much sky, it makes your chest ache. And in the middle of it all, rising like a shadow stitched from legend, is the man the world would come to fear, curse, and follow. Genghis Khan. Born as Temujin, sometime around 1162, on the cold, dry Mongolian steppes, his life begins not in luxury, but in exile. When his father is poisoned by rivals, Temujin's family is cast out. They survive by eating roots, hunting mice, and living off scraps. There's a tale, maybe true, maybe not, that Temujin kills his half-brother over stolen food. Brutal? Absolutely. But in the steppe, survival is brutality. Historians still argue whether that act was cold-blooded or calculated, a boy shedding weakness to become legend. What's clear? He learns early, loyalty is rare, and fear is currency. You ride beside him now, your hands raw from the reins, your horse lathered with sweat, as he unites the fractured Mongol tribes. He does it with charisma, cunning, and an absolutely terrifying military genius. He reorganizes society into units of 10, not by blood, but by merit. Your loyalty is no longer to your kin, but to the Khan. It's brilliant. It's terrifying. It works. By 1206, the dream thunders across the plains as Temujin is crowned Genghis Khan, universal ruler of all Mongols. And what does he do next? He builds an empire so vast, so fast, that it becomes the largest contiguous land empire in history. From Korea to Hungary. From the Siberian forests to the sands of Persia. All beneath the hooves of Mongol horses. He doesn't just conquer. He transforms. Your quirky fact, Genghis Khan created a postal system. Yes, seriously. The Yam, a network of way stations where couriers swapped fresh horses, let messages travel at breakneck speed across continents. It was the medieval Amazon Prime, but instead of tracking your order, you were tracking military orders, intelligence, and maybe the occasional love letter. He also enforced religious tolerance, allowing Buddhists, Christians, and Muslims to coexist. In fact, he hated corruption more than any religion. You feel that now, riding through a captured city, the scent of scorched parchment in the air. Genghis spares scholars, engineers, translators, and demolishes aristocracies. The poor often fare better under his rule than under their old masters. But don't get cozy, dreamer. The Khan is not merciful. He destroys entire cities. Leaves behind pyramids of skulls as warnings. The destruction of Khwarezmian cities after their Shah betrayed him? Devastating. Cities like Nishapur and Urgench are wiped off the map with such thoroughness that, centuries later, their ruins still echo his name. And yet, there's a softness buried in his legend. He loved his mother dearly. Trusted women as advisors. Consulted a shaman. Took time to write laws, the yasa, that codified justice among his people. Some experts remain divided on whether Genghis Khan was a psychopathic conqueror or a misunderstood modernizer. Maybe he was both. Maybe great power always walks with contradiction. Your horse slows. You stand at his burial site, or, rather, you try to. Because here's the mystery. No one knows where Genghis Khan is buried. Legend says his funeral escort slaughtered everyone they passed to keep the site secret. Then the soldiers killed themselves. Then those soldiers were killed. You get the idea. A lingering mystery for scholars that still sends archaeologists combing the steppes with drones, sensors, and prayers. You, however, feel it. A cold wind on your cheek. A shiver in your dream. Somewhere, beneath this endless sky, the great Khan still sleeps. And as you close your eyes, the stars shift. Because the dream is not yet done with empires. Across the sea, in a land of icy winds and orthodox domes, another warrior rises, not from nomadic tribes, but from fire and fear. A man whose name still sends echoes down frozen rivers. Get ready, my brave sleeper. Ivan the Terrible is coming. Snow. That's the first thing you feel. Powder-fine flakes, cold as whispers, drifting onto your shoulders like the fingers of a forgotten ghost. You're in Russia now. 16th century. The land of fur-lined shadows and birch trees that lean like listeners. The bells of Moscow toll heavy in the winter air, and somewhere behind thick red walls, a boy is learning how to survive, alone. He is Ivan IV Vasilyevich. But history will call him Ivan the Terrible. And yes, the name is earned. But how it's earned is where the dream sharpens its claws. You're barely old enough to stand, and already the court circles you like wolves. Your father dies when you're 3. Your mother, likely poisoned, vanishes when you're 8. And the boy, Ivan, becomes Tsar at the tender age of 16. But it's not the coronation that matters. It's what burns inside him. A slow, blistering fury. A storm that waits decades before it breaks. He becomes the first Tsar of all Russia, a title so grand it wraps itself in God, legacy, and unstoppable power. He has himself crowned not merely as king, but as a chosen autocrat, God's sword on earth. You watch now as he reforms the state. In his early years, Ivan is surprisingly progressive, drafting laws to protect peasants, streamlining the military, and even hosting foreign ambassadors with dazzling grace. But don't relax yet. Because the dream is just sharpening its blade. In 1565, Ivan splits Russia in two, literally. He creates the Oprichnina, a personal domain ruled solely by him, separate from the traditional nobility. Within this realm, He builds a private army dressed in black, mounted on horses with dogs' heads hanging from their saddles, symbolizing their role as bloodhounds of the Tsar. Yeah. Not your average palace guard. Their job? Crush dissent. Hunt traitors. Enforce terror. And that, dreamer, is when the warmth leaves the candlelight. Your quirky fact: Ivan had a deep fascination with astrology and omens. He often delayed major decisions based on celestial signs, consulting seers to confirm his sense of divine purpose. Imagine running a country like it's Mercury retrograde, all year long. And here's where it gets truly tragic. Ivan, obsessed with betrayal, begins turning on everyone, including his own family. His rage spirals out of control. During a violent argument in 1581, he strikes and kills his eldest son, Ivan Ivanovich. A royal patricide. A heartbreak he never recovers from. You're standing in the shadows of the Tretiakov Gallery now, gazing at Ilya Repin's famous painting, the Tsar cradling his dying son, eyes wide with horror. You feel it. The ache. The madness. The unbearable weight of absolute power. Historians still argue whether Ivan's paranoia was rooted in illness, spiritual crisis, or calculated rule by fear. A lingering debate: was he mad, or merely too sane for a world gone mad around him? Whatever the cause, his actions speak louder. He orders the massacre of Novgorod, suspecting treason. Thousands perish in frozen blood, tossed into icy rivers, their screams muffled by snow. He tortures nobles. Poisons wives. Builds a state on fear and sermons. Yet he also composes religious music, writes soulful letters, and keeps a library rumored to contain ancient Byzantine texts, lost forever, perhaps hidden in secret tunnels beneath the Kremlin. Yes, really. A fringe theory says the lost library of Ivan the Terrible still sleeps beneath Moscow, protected by spells and secrecy. Like a Russian Atlantis of knowledge. But Ivan? He does not sleep. Not well, anyway. Toward the end, his health decays. He suffers from arthritis, hallucinations, and perhaps mercury poisoning, courtesy of his beloved medications. In 1584, he collapses while playing chess. Just like that. The dream falls with him. And yet, the empire he forges remains. Russia emerges, not as a fragile patchwork, but as a titan in waiting. The title of Tsar lives on. The ghost of Ivan hovers in the ice-crusted halls of every Russian ruler to follow. Including one who will take his vision, his violence, and his appetite for empire, and scale it up. But not in Russia. No, your dream pulls west now. To a city of stone, music, and eagle standards. Where another warrior king rises, Napoleon, the self-made Caesar of a trembling continent. So shake the snow from your shoulders, my brave sleeper. We march toward fire once more. Your boots strike marble. Not grass. Not dust. Marble, white as smoke, veined like lightning. You're standing in Notre Dame Cathedral, and the candles flicker beneath a dome heavy with centuries. Around you, velvet, gold, a breathless court of dukes, diplomats, and queens. But all eyes are fixed on the man in the center. The man who takes the crown, and places it on his own head. He doesn't wait for the Pope. He is the Pope, the sword, the state, the sun. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French. You've heard his name whispered in 100 languages, some with awe, some with bitterness, some with fear. But tonight, your dream shows you not just the conqueror, but the boy, the fire, the legend stitched in smoke. Born on the island of Corsica in 1769, Napoleon is no royal. He's a scholarship kid at military school, bullied, brilliant, and burning with ambition. By 24, he's a general. By 30, he's a legend. By 35, he crowns himself ruler of Europe's most volatile revolution. Historians still argue whether Napoleon saved the ideals of the French Revolution, or strangled them with one elegant gloved hand. Because yes, he ends the guillotine's frenzy. He builds roads, schools, banks, and the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework that still shapes the world. But he also declares himself emperor, wages war across the continent, and leaves entire cities smoldering. You, brave dreamer, are there beside him. You ride through Austerlitz, where he outwits the Austrians and Russians with the cold elegance of a chess master. You stand on the wind-lashed cliffs of Ulm, watching the impossible, an army surrendering without a fight. You march into Vienna, Milan, Berlin, each city a domino in his vision of empire. And then, the snow returns. Because this empire, it flies too close to the sun. In 1812, Napoleon invades Russia. A decision so famous for its disaster, it becomes a cautionary tale carved in ice. Your quirky fact: Napoleon brought along an elite team of scientists, cooks, mapmakers, and even a printing press during his campaigns. His military expeditions doubled as cultural tours, one of which led to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. But science can't stop frostbite. His army, 600,000 strong, melts down to less than 100,000. Not from battle, but from winter, starvation, and disease. The Grande Armée becomes the ghost of Europe. Back in Paris, cracks widen. His enemies close in. You're there in 1815, at Waterloo, as the dream darkens. Mud, smoke, screaming horses. A cannon's breath on your neck. Napoleon's last gamble, undone by rain and relentless English volleys. Some experts remain divided on whether he could have won that day, had he struck earlier, had the Prussians not arrived, had the mud not swallowed his guns. A battle balanced on inches. He is captured. Twice. First exiled to Elba, then, after a brief return known as the 100 Days, banished forever to the lonely rock of St. Helena. There, he fades. No marble, no court, no empire. Just wind, ink, and memory. And here's the eerie part, he keeps writing. Even in exile, Napoleon drafts essays, letters, reflections, still trying to shape the world from the shadows. A fringe theory claims he was slowly poisoned by arsenic on St. Helena. Traces were found in samples of his hair. Was it his captors? His staff? His wallpaper? No one knows. But you can still feel his presence. In every law code. Every map. Every nation that rose or fell in his wake. Because while Genghis carved an empire with horses, and Ivan ruled by fear, Napoleon wielded ideas like bayonets. Liberty. Order. Destiny. Control. A crown forged in fire, and reduced to ash. But hold on, dear sleeper, don't drift just yet. Because as the world recalibrates from Napoleon's storm, another sun rises in the east. A man who will unite the scattered provinces of a sleeping empire. A warrior scholar. A strategist. A king whose dream is carved in jade and discipline. The final figure in your journey is waiting. The Dragon Emperor himself. Zhao Kuangyin. Your dream exhales, and with it, the haze of gunpowder and revolution fades into a dawn washed in ink and mist. You're in China now. The Song dynasty hasn't yet begun, but the land feels old, ancient, as if it's been waiting for the right heartbeat to restart history. The rivers flow like ribbons of silk across green valleys. And beneath a peach-colored sky, a man bows to the mountains, before claiming a throne. He is Zhao Kuangyin, a soldier, a thinker, a drinker of wine, and a unifier of chaos. His name may not echo in Western textbooks like Genghis or Napoleon. But here, in the memory of China, he is thunder wrapped in serenity. He begins humbly, as a general under the later Zhou dynasty in the fractious 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, a time so full of backstabs and collapses, it makes Game of Thrones look like nap time. But Zhao is different. He's known not just for his tactical brilliance, but for his patience, kindness, and a reputation for falling asleep during important banquets. That's your quirky fact. Zhao was so relaxed, he'd snooze right through royal feasts. That, or he was secretly testing who dared steal his dumplings. Then, in 960, everything changes. One snowy morning, in a moment part legend, part calculated power move, Zhao's own troops crown him emperor. Literally. They drape him in the yellow robe, the imperial symbol, and beg him to take control before more chaos erupts. And here's the twist. He agrees, but on one condition. Zhao Kuangyin doesn't want to rule by fear or blood. He knows what endless civil war does to a nation. So he sets a precedent. He invites rival generals to a feast, gets them good and tipsy, and kindly suggests they retire early. In return, he gives them fancy villas, pensions, and safety. No executions. No purges. Just a clever, velvet-gloved takeover. Historians still argue whether this moment was mercy or manipulation. Some say Zhao was a sage ruler. Others see a fox in monk's robes. But one thing is clear, he ends the era of chaos and becomes the founder of the Song dynasty. And oh, what a dynasty! Under Zhao, and his successors, the Song dynasty becomes one of the most culturally radiant eras in Chinese history. You, brave dreamer, now walk lantern-lit streets as poets sip tea and print books with movable type. The economy flourishes. Paper money is born. Astronomers map the stars. Engineers tinker with spinning gears and bridges that defy gravity. Your feet rest in gardens of scholars. Not generals. Because unlike other warrior kings, Zhao Kuangyin elevates civil officials over military ones, a bold move, and a dangerous one. He believes that lasting strength comes not from swords, but from minds. He builds schools, revamps the imperial exam system, and floods the bureaucracy with thinkers. The army remains, but it becomes secondary to statecraft. A unique choice, and one scholars still debate. Was it wisdom, or a fatal vulnerability? Because eventually, this choice will weaken the military's power to defend the borders. And centuries later, the Song dynasty will fall to the Mongols. But tonight, in this quiet hour, you're not watching a fall. You're watching a beginning. Zhao Guangyin's rule, though short, he dies in 976, possibly murdered by his own brother, sets in motion an empire that lasts over 300 years. Not through terror. Not through conquest. But through the long, patient breath of unity. And here's your final mystery, dear sleeper. Zhao Guangyin's death remains unsolved. He dies suddenly, with no record of illness. His brother, Zhao Guangyi, becomes emperor shortly after. Some whisper about betrayal. Others speak of divine fate. A lingering puzzle for scholars. And with that, the dream dims. You have ridden with kings and emperors. Fought under banners both noble and blood-stained. Seen thrones rise, crumble, and reforge themselves in fire, frost, and silk. But there is one truth, steady and silent, that echoes across them all. The greatest warrior kings weren't just conquerors. They were architects of legacy. And now, as your journey ends, the moon climbs high, and your body sinks into stillness. So here we are, my brave sleeper. The last echoes of battle have faded. The banners have been folded. The swords sheathed. And all that remains is stillness. Across the dreamscape, the kings you met linger not as ghosts, but as soft impressions, footprints in the dust of time. Charlemagne's quiet discipline. Saladin's prayer under desert stars. Napoleon's restless pen scratching in exile. Zhao Guangyin's wine sleep under lantern light. Close your eyes, and let them fade gently, like incense rising in the chill of morning. You've wandered centuries tonight. Touched frost-bitten beards and kissed bloodied crowns. You've seen power at its most dazzling, and its most fragile. And now, there's no need to choose a favorite. Because the greatest warrior king is not a single man, but a feeling. A tension between strength and stillness. Between conquering the world, and learning how to leave it behind. Let that truth settle over you, like warm silk drawn over tired shoulders. The night is deep now. Your breath has slowed. And history, for the moment, is content to sleep beside you. So let the candle burn low. Let the echo of hoofbeats dissolve into the hum of your fan. And remember, you're part of this story too. Good night, my fearless dreamer. Sleep well. Rest deep. And may your dreams be crowned with wonder.